All right, 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM listeners, we got a phenomenal interview coming your way. We have the one, the only Emmy award-winning DJ Johnny Juice of Public Enemy. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing great. First thing I want to say, man, I grew up on Public Enemy, so just thank you for your amazing contribution to hip-hop, man, because you did some phenomenal work with Chuck D and Flava Flav.
Oh, thank you.
You are most certainly welcome, Johnny. But I gotta ask you, what made you decide to get into the music industry initially?
I didn't. I was like anybody else. I grew up in the Bronx, and I watched this thing called hip hop be born in the '70s. I immediately started to participate, first as a graffiti writer, then as a b-boy, then eventually as a DJ. And due to some unforeseen circumstances, my family moved us out of the Bronx and about 35 minutes away to Long Island. So coming to Long Island, the culture shock being what it was, I started to, kind of really become an introvert. I started b-boying more, started attracting cats from around the way who weren't used to that in Long Island yet, because there was a budding hip hop community, but it wasn't really out there like it was in the Bronx. And by the time I assembled enough people, the rap and DJ thing got big. So I wanted to DJ. I saw these DJs rocking out, and I wanted to do it. So I started DJing, and it turned into a battle thing, and then after me battling, after a while, I went to a DJ battle, DJ MC battle that a crew named Spectrum City was having in Long Island and Hempstead with a couple of my friends, KBMC, and the other member of my crew, Chillowski, couldn't make it. Those two MCs went on to become Charlie Brown and Busta Rhymes. And I ended up winning the DJ contest, and I became part of the Public Enemy camp once they formed it up and created their crews and whatnot.
And with the Busta Rhymes thing, that was actually next on my question list, but I have to ask you, when you actually got connected with Charlie Brown and Busta Rhymes, when you first met Busta, did you really think he'd be such a huge individual like as he is today? Because some people put him in a category of best lyricist of all time.
Well, I'll be honest with you. When I met Busta, he wasn't an MC at all. He came up to me. He was popping. He was actually trying to get down with my b-boy crew. So him and his younger brother. So I saw him do their thing, and I eventually put him down with my crew. Later on, when I started actually DJing more, he wanted to be a DJ. I think his hands were a little too heavy for that, and this is before his growth spurt, so he wasn't even that big yet. And eventually I formed a crew with Charlie Brown first, actually, because me and Brown's older brother were DJ partners. And his brother Hig was a pretty well-known DJ, one of the best DJs on Long Island. He did clubs, he did events, parties, you name it. So we became a crew. Eventually, me and Brown became a duo, and then eventually Bus became part of our crew. And it started out as a beatboxer, and then worked his way up to the MC part.
And also, you were a DJ and MC for Next Plateau recording artists, the Kings of Pleasure. I have to ask you, can you tell us how that came to be for you, and how did you get connected with them?
Well, I wish we were called the Kings of Pleasure. We were called the Kings of Pressure.
Oh, my apologies.
No, it's cool, because I like that. I might have to use that. Remember when I tell you that Spectrum City was having a DJ and MC battle? Well, Chuck and Hank and all those dudes were putting together concepts for crews, and they were finding members to insert in those situations. One of those crews was the Kings of Pressure. They got the idea from a city in Pennsylvania called King of Prussia. So they were looking for MCs and DJs. I won the DJ contest, so I became a member of the Kings of Pressure. And while I was working on our single, how to reach us and give me the mic, Chuck would give me rides back and forth from the studio because I have a car. I was in high school. And Chuck on the way back one day, he said, we're doing an album. You want to work on it with us? So we need some scratches. And I'm like, sure. So he put in the cassette, and that song that he played for me was My Uzi Weighs a Ton. So he said, next weekend I'll come scoop you up. We go to the studio, you lay some scratches. I grabbed the Crater records, my mixer, and my turntable. We went out to INS in Manhattan, and I did the scratching. The whole thing was done in a day. Me and Terminator, as well as Keith and Hank were there, and Eric Sadler, of course. And in between my scratch takes and them doing other things in the studio, Eric Sadler was teaching me how to program the drum machines and whatnot.
And also, speaking of scratch, you actually did scratch and production on Public Enemy's Yo Bum Rush the Show, and of course, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. I have to ask you, how did you get connected with Public Enemy? And of course, what was it like being part of such a famous hip hop group?
Well, first of all, they weren't famous when I met them. Second of all, they were Spectrum City. They're the guys that had the contest looking for the rappers because they wanted to be a management company, similar to what Herbie Lovebug was doing with, Dana Dane and Salt and Pepper and Kid and Play. So their whole angle was Public Enemy was going to last 2 years. That's it. They were going to do the albums for Def Jam, get out of there, and literally manage all these other groups that they were trying to put out. That was their main goal. Of course, Public Enemy blew up, and that was unforeseen, and it did what it did. Being that I won that contest to be part of the Kings of Pressure, I was part of the camp. They assembled a loose consortium of people to work on the music. There was Keith Shockley and his brother Hank, of course, Chuck, and then they got their partner Eric Sadler, who had a demo rehearsal studio downstairs because he was a real musician. He played multiple instruments and he worked on a lot of big projects. They eventually asked me to be part of that. So when we weren't working on the Kings of Pressure stuff, we were working on other people's music and finding samples. Me and Keith would go through records, and maybe the DJ, I would scratch it in, and Eric would program stuff, and Keith would do that as well. And that eventually led to that group becoming the Bomb Squad.
And the one thing I gotta ask you is, because I never knew before Public Enemy they wanted to become a management company. Like, did you ever understand why they wanted to do that? Like, what actually made them transition to actually into being artists?
Well, they did radio. See, Spectrum City was a big mobile DJ unit. They did parties. Hank would rent halls or some kind of banquet hall or VFW or American Legion, and they would throw parties and would make money. They also did radio on college radio. They did college radio, BAU, which was in Adelphi University. So that Adelphi University nucleus gave birth to a lot of groups. Dr. Trey and the Original Concept were also at BAU doing the operating room. Chuck and his boys were doing the Spectrum City Hour of Power. My boy Wildman Steve was up there. Bill Stephanie was Mr. Dilmo's Chill. Bill Stephanie ended up leaving and going to work for Def Jam. And he was instrumental in bringing Public Enemy over. They wanted to sign Chuck. So it was going to be Chuck D, but Chuck wouldn't do it without Flav. So since a song that they did for their radio show 3 years prior called Public Enemy No. 1 was the single they were going to release, they decided to make the name of the group Public Enemy instead of Chucky D. So they changed their name, they put out these records, but they really wanted to run the radio market and manage groups.
That's actually really cool. I actually did not know that Public Enemy actually was actually first off starting off in that venture. I just thought they were a hip hop group, man. Like I said, you learn something new every day, and that's actually an extraordinary thing.
It's Chuck's first love was radio. So.
And also, jumping ahead just a little bit in the timeline, you were actually, in 2013 yourself, along with Public Enemy, were actually inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I have to ask, how does it feel knowing that you are solidified within the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Because that's a huge, huge accomplishment.
It's interesting you say that. The day before the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, we did. I should say we. It was like a 2 or 3 day period of activity in L.A. because the induction was in Los Angeles. And one of the days, the first day was the Grammy Museum, and then the next day, Brian Hargrove, who was Public Enemy's music director, bass player, drummer, you name it, he set up this thing at the Gibson showroom in Beverly Hills. It was a big panel with Chuck and Jack Douglas, who was the guy that produced the original Walk This Way by Aerosmith. And then there was Eddie Kramer, who produced everybody from Kiss to Jimi Hendrix. So at this panel, I actually provided the music for that. And Jack Douglas asked me, how, the same thing you just asked me, how does it feel, blah, 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 blah. And my answer probably pissed him off, but I was not too, it wasn't something that was a huge check mark on my bucket list, because I don't feel sometimes that organizations like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really care about the genre to begin with. And I think it's, and this is my opinion, that they do it specifically to broaden their fan base and solidify themselves in the minds of the people that really listen to hip hop, because it hasn't done anything for Public Enemy, like financially. It's not like we could charge more per show or anything like that. I don't see Kiss doing more shows. I don't see Rush making more money. So the thing is, it's cool, but I think that hip hop should develop its own awards and its own Hall of Fame, which they're doing right now, actually, because it would mean more coming from your peers. And as you already know, Gene Simmons was running his mouth about how rap shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and things of that nature. And, it's a veiled racial thing, because he doesn't say specifically, but I think he feels that it's his music or their music or white people music. And rock and roll was invented by black people anyway. So it's bittersweet, It's cool to be inducted. I had more fun talking to the rock stars backstage than I did actually being on stage, to be honest with you. I got to talk to Tom Petty for like 25 minutes, and he was genuinely interested in how I felt about that. And he didn't know me from Adam. He didn't know who the hell I was, and that's Tom Petty, and now he's gone. So that, I think, is more impactful to me than them saying, great, you're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And that is most definitely true. You make some very, very valid points, man. I most definitely agree with you 100% on those topics.
I feel the same way about VH1 with their hip hop on. The thing is, a friend of mine named Tito from the Fearless Four, who's a legend, had his Tito's Hip Hop Icon Awards, and he had to fight to sell enough tickets for people to come to these things. Most people came only because they were getting an award. And the thing about it is, those same dudes that wouldn't come to one of his awards would bend over backwards if VH1 threw an award at him. And who's VH1? They wouldn't even play rap on their video shows back in the day. So why would you bend over backwards for VH1, but not for one of your own?
That's true. I think it's more of the name. You know what I mean? I think it's more of the clout behind VH1. Unfortunately, that's normally how it goes. Like, for instance, the Grammys. You know what I mean? When people hear the word Grammy, they're like, "Oh my God, it's a Grammy," right? But then, for instance, you hear like a small town hip hop award, people are like, whatever. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunate how it is. I think it's just a clout behind the name.
Not behind the name, but the thing is, hip hop has always been an outlaw culture, right? And let me clarify that for my street families who are actual outlaws. If you don't know, those are the guys that people call biker gangs and what have you. The outlaws out there, like Savage Nomads, the 31s, and what have you. But in hip hop were outcasts from the other areas and genres of music that wouldn't like cater to us, like the disco crowd that was popular in the late '70s, and the cats that wanted to jump on the floor and do some floor rocking, they were looked at as ghetto, and they were told to go out in the street and go to Herc's parties and do that. So it isn't like now where hip hop people gravitate to it because it's the most popular thing. It wasn't the most popular thing. So you had to be an outcast to go join that particular, set of people. And keep in mind, there were only a certain amount of DJ and MC crews, so it wasn't like everybody was doing it like they're doing it now. So I think people fail to realize that because they don't have the perspective and the historical perspective or the cultural perspective, and they definitely weren't there. So it's been romanticized to be this thing that had you been back there in the '70s, you'd realize it wasn't what you thought it was.
And also, before we move off the Public Enemy side of things, I have to ask you. You've done as we already know, you've done a great amount of work with the group. But I have to ask you, what is one of your most favorite memories as being a part of Public Enemy?
My favorite memory?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think possibly performing with people that were not hip hop cats, like legends outside of hip hop. We performed in Chicago one time, and Steve Arrington from the group Slave came up on stage and sat in, and we rocked with him. I got to go to Chicago in 2000, I think, or 2001, and Chuck, and we rocked out with Muddy Waters Band for this documentary called Godfathers and Sons. Chuck and I did a song for ESPN's Ali Rap that was nominated for an Emmy Award. And I got to sit next to Stuart Scott, rest in peace, when they called out, the nomination, for our song. And Chuck wasn't even there. Chuck was at his daughter's soccer game, but I was representing for the crew to get the Emmy if we won. We didn't win, but it was cool, to sit there. And when Chuck came up on the screen and the music came on, Stuart Scott saying "Fight the Power" real loud, and that was real cool. So little things like that. Not even big things, little things like that. Sitting with Phil Upchurch, legendary guitar player who played with Curtis Mayfield and Donny Hathaway, and he played on Thriller. Talking with him about his anecdotes and stuff he remembered, and Pete Cozy from Miles Davis's band, and Gene Barge. Those kind of dudes were introduced to me because of my association with Public Enemy, and because of the amount of respect that the group gained outside of the genre that allowed me to meet some of my heroes like Earth, Wind and Fire, and that kind of thing is probably encapsulates my favorite memories, plural.
And also, in 2014, you actually received the Rappin' Tate the Great Hip Hop Hip Hop United Under One Star Humanitarian Award. I have to ask you, how did that award come to be for you, and how does it feel just knowing that you actually won a humanitarian award?
Oh, actually, yeah, that was an individual award for me, which was great because, as you can imagine, I don't get too many individual awards when it comes to the Public Enemy thing. I've gotten my own nominations for things like, I was nominated for a couple of NAACP Image Awards for composition and things of that nature, which are great. But this particular award meant a lot to me because it came from a fellow Zulu Nation brother, and it was kind of musical related, but not really. I do a lot of community work. I mentor people, things of that nature. I'm the global vice president of the Bronx Boys Rockin' Crew, the first all-Latino b-boy crew ever. Started in '75 by Batch, Cash, and Sharp. And we are now a community organization that uplifts our community through the arts. So when I received that actually was real close to my heart because it actually highlighted, my work in that field, that particular field.
And also, aside from the hip hop and music side of things, I saw a post on your Instagram that you have won medals in Taekwondo. I have to ask you, what made you decide to start doing Taekwondo?
So I've been doing that longer than anything else in my life. I was 3 years old. My uncle came back from Vietnam, and he started teaching me Koju. And he taught me until he couldn't teach me anymore, and he was a black belt. So when he got to the point where he couldn't teach me anything else, I started taking Taekwondo with my other uncle, who was a little younger than my other uncle. And that particular uncle was a champion in Korea when he was stationed in Korea, and that was it. I was hooked. I started competing first in forms and then in fighting. I go to the Junior Olympics and I won. I was slated to go to the Olympics, but Taekwondo didn't become an Olympic sport until '88, a demo sport. That's the year I entered the U.S. military. In '92, I was on the national team, vying for a spot to go to the Olympics, and I eventually became paralyzed from the neck down due to activities in the military. So that kept me from there. But before that paralysis, I won a bunch of titles. And then, I've been doing Taekwondo my whole life. Martial arts in general. I have multiple black belts, and I take Tai Chi now. So that's something I'll do forever until I can't move anymore.
And I do want to say I'm deeply sorry that happened to you, man. I really am deeply sorry.
That's all right, man. I mean, things happen. I'm walking and I'm able to move now, so it's all good.
And also, you are the global vice president of the Bronx Boys Rocking Crew. I have to ask you, tell us a bit more about that, and how did that come to be for you?
Well, just so you know, the Bronx Boys Rocking Crew started as a graffiti crew in '74, and in '75, one of the members' batch decided to make it a rocking crew because the word breaking and breakdance didn't exist. You were rocking. It was a rocking crew. All the crews from back in those days had the word rock in it. Star Child, The Rock, Rockwell Association, even Rocksteady. So the Bronx Boys became this phenomenon. They were doing their thing, and eventually, a lot of moves foundation moves were created by members of the crew, like three-step by Batch, helicopters, Russell's kicks by Abby, his brother, who is currently the global president. Eventually, two members decided to spin off the crew, and they asked permission, and Batch gave it to them. They formed the Rocksteady Crew. They were members of TBB. And TBB, being a legendary foundation crew, would have anniversaries every year, and I would go to the anniversaries, and I would support any way I could. I would go with Tony Tone from the Cold Crush Brothers and my homeboy DJ Outlaw, rest in peace. And I would DJ, and I would do it for free, because this was given back to the legends that created this platform for us. And eventually, Abby made me an honorary member. And one day I was in Florida visiting, and he was in Florida. And I went out to visit him, and he asked me if I would become the VP. So I accepted, and started putting together a plan to make the Bronx Boys, and now it's the Bronx Boys and Girls Global, making them a not-for-profit organization.
But I have to ask you, DJ Johnny Juice, what's next for you? Is there anything I happen to miss during this interview? Anything else you would still like to promote? Will we still have you here live on the radio station?
Well, I have a new group called The Odyssey, ODDYSY. It's myself and my boy, the Royal KJ. He's a 6'5" South African white guy that plays bass and sings his ass off. And I do all the rest. And then we mix and mingle the in between. It has no genre, so I wish I can tell you it sounded like something, but it sounds like a lot of things. We have a single now with Chuck D called Bang Bang. We have an album that's dropping called You Must Be Just Don't Know Who I Is. A lot of great features on there. Charlie Brown's on it. Dick O'D's on it. DMC from Run DMC is on it. Cool Kim from the UMCs, a.k.a. NY Oil, is on it. We got Garrett Scheider from Parliament Funkadelic playing on it. My boy Neil Faison rocking guitar on it. We got a lot of people rocking on the album, man. It's real dope. And I'm actually working on the second album already. I just finished some stuff up on a new Hush Hush Public Enemy album that'll be released soon. That was going to be Chuck's 60th birthday present to himself. So there's a lot of things that I'm working on, but the Odyssey is first and foremost.
And so, DJ Johnny Juice, this is the time in the interview that I give a chance for the individual that comes on the radio station, just a chance to give shoutouts to whomever they want to give shoutouts to. And if you can, drop them social media handles. That way our listeners can follow you and stay updated on everything that you have going on if they're not already doing so.
Word. All right, well, I want to give a shout out to everyone. I could give individual shout-outs, but that'll take forever, and I'll miss someone, and they'll be pissed. So anyone that's ever actually supported me, and of course supported Public Enemy, but me in particular, because some people support the group and won't support my individual efforts, which is unfortunate, but that's how it goes. So if you ever supported Johnny Juice and Johnny Juice related projects, I love you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You can reach me at Twitter. It's at Johnny Juice, JohnnyJuice. You can reach me on Instagram. It's at DJ Johnny Juice. If you have Facebook, I have a artist page. It's DJ Johnny Juice. So it's facebook.com, DJ Johnny Juice. And of course, you can go to theodyssey.com, www.theoddysy.com. Also, The Odyssey at Twitter and The Odyssey on Instagram. Please check us out. Please support. And that's it.
I gotta say, Johnny, thank you so much again for taking the time out of your evening to come on 97.7 Outlaw Radio FM. I know I said at the beginning, but I gotta say it at the end, man. I grew up on Public Enemy, so thank you so much for everything you did for the hip-hop culture, man. You are the definition of hip-hop, and thank you so much for coming on and just sharing some stories and, of course, helping to promote your newest group.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to listening to more of your stuff.
Hey, most definitely. Thank you so much. Anytime, if you ever need any promotion, if you ever want another interview, don't hesitate to reach out. You're always welcome on the radio station.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're most certainly welcome. Have yourself a wonderful night.
You too, man. Peace.